Hi everybody and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles, and on this episode we're doing It Came From the Network. Topic of this It Came From the Network, WWE Old School from June 16th, 1984, marked on Peacock as Season 13, Episode 6. And the reason for this, you probably already know that the great Iron Sheik just passed away a few days ago, so I put up a little poll. There's a very famous Iron Sheik match on here, Iron Sheik vs. Sergeant Slaughter in a boot camp match. I put up a poll on our community page. It was either this or the night that the Sheik won the WWF Championship. This is what won the poll. So in tribute to the Iron Sheik, we're going to review this card. If you haven't watched any of my videos before, we grade everything on a 1 to 5 scale. 1 is the worst, 5 is the best. Let's jump right in. We start off with Tony Garea going up against Don the Magnificent Morocco. Morocco has Mr. Fuji with him. Right off the bat, I felt a little bit disappointed with this match. I've watched a lot of Tony Garea stuff, especially his stuff during the 70s. And I think in the 70s, and I've mentioned this before, the WWF style out of all the territories or all the companies from the 70s and 80s doesn't hold up as well as some of the others. Mid-South, Crockett, Memphis, they all seem to hold up better than the WWF/WWE style does. But I was looking at this as a matchup. Tony Garea is a really good wrestler, or was, and so was Don Morocco. Now, I'm not saying that this was a bad match. It was just kind of a ho-hum, run-of-the-mill match here. Ultimately, Morocco picks up the win. I'm giving this one a 3. Before we get into our next match, we get a 10-bell salute for Vincent J. McMahon, Vince McMahon's father, who had passed away, I believe, within a month of the show. This was the first show at Madison Square Garden since his passing, so kind of cool that that was in here. Then we go right into a match. It's Jose Luis Rivera up against George the Animal Steele, who's managed by Mr. Fuji. Steele hadn't yet turned face. He was still a heel. However, he had a lot of the mannerisms as he would as a face here, like he bites a turnbuckle during the match. Two things of note: he doesn't have the green food coloring tongue, and he also heavily uses a foreign object, which he's seen hiding in his trunk several times. To me, this match was absolutely boring. Again, it was another one I wanted to like more. I liked George Steele. He was a guy I rooted for as a child. However, this was nothing much more than a glorified squash match. George the Animal Steele does pick up the win here. I'm giving this one a 2. Next up, we have a match for the WWF Tag Team Championship. Adrian Adonis and Dick Murdoch, the East-West Connection, are going up against the Wild Samoans, Afa and Sika, the original heads of the table. Well, I guess Peter Maivia is the original head of the table, but you get the idea. This was a rematch because Adonis and Murdoch took the titles off the Samoans. This time it's a 2 out of 3 falls match. This is kind of an interesting one because we're at the time where we didn't know where Lou Albano's alliances laid. Was it with the Samoans, who he had been a manager with, who are now turning face, or was it with Adonis and Murdoch? He kind of plays both sides of the fence here. After the first fall, the East-West Connection, Adonis and Murdoch win. He comes out and congratulates them. Then we go to the second fall where the Samoans pick up the win, so he comes out and congratulates them as well. And then we get to the third fall, which ends up being a double disqualification. I rather enjoyed this match. This is probably my second favorite match on the card. The only thing I didn't like is it didn't end with a definitive winner. However, I liked the style here. The pacing was good. It was better paced than most of the matches on this card. The physicality was really good. The believability, the ability to draw you in was really good here. It ends up with a draw, which I wish it didn't, but other than that, I thought it was a fantastic match. I'm giving the match a 4. I really liked it. That's followed up with a backstage segment with Lord Alfred Hayes interviewing Lou Albano, asking him basically, where do your allegiances lie? And Albano says, I have no allegiance. My allegiance is to whoever the winner is. Kind of still being in full heel character, which I believe we're roughly a year away from his face turn. So pretty cool seeing that here. After that, we get another match. We get SD Jones, which stands for Special Delivery Jones, going up against Jesse the Body Ventura. This was another match that I didn't like at all. I won't say it's the worst match that I've ever seen, but it's pretty bad. Very slow, very plodding, and just really felt like there was not much going on here. Ventura does pick up the win. I'm giving this one a 2. That's followed up with an interview Intercontinental Championship match. We have Tito Santana defending against Greg the Hammer Valentine. This was another match I was pretty hyped for. I seen a lot of Valentine and Santana's feud. This was right about the time I got into wrestling, less than a year before this. And this was one of the first big feuds that I really remember. And this was a good match, don't get me wrong. I've seen a lot better from these two. I kind of felt like this match was definitely setting up for a rematch. Without looking at the time frame and without looking back at it, I don't know where this was among the feud. It definitely feels like this was to set up for something in the future. Ultimately, Valentine picks up the win where he hits an atomic drop on Santana on the floor, which Santana gets counted out, thus losing, but not losing the Intercontinental Championship. I thought this one was good. It could have been a lot better. I'm giving this one a 3. That's followed up with another backstage segment. This time Lord Alfred Hayes has Tito Santana with him. Tito Santana basically says he's tired of being cheated. He's tired of rule breakers like Valentine breaking the rules. And he's fed up. He's going to make it his mission to get back at Valentine. Then that's followed up with another backstage segment with Lord Alfred Hayes and Gorilla Monsoon. They talk about the previous match. Gorilla hypes up the fact that during the match, Valentine could have won it a few different times. I like these back-to-back and explaining the segment. However, the match itself, I'm giving a 3. I don't know if I said that. I thought it was good. Again, the promos and interviews afterwards made it a little bit better, but still, there's just something missing for me. Next match, we have Dr. D. David Schultz going up against Andre the Giant. This was very interesting because I genuinely think of this era of Andre the Giant as the last bastion of Andre being a good in-ring wrestler. From about here till WrestleMania 1, Andre was still close to where he was when he was in his prime. He wasn't as unmobile and broken down as he would be by WrestleMania 3. This was a solid match. Dr. D. David Schultz was a great wrestler that is the reason, or one of the reasons why I got into watching wrestling, him and Piper, specifically during this time frame. And the believability of Schultz, the promos that the two of them would cut, the believability of Piper, their combination is really what drew me in. This match was good. It felt a little bit short here, in my opinion. I think these two could have had a better match if they were given a little bit more time. Andre does pick up the win because obviously it's Andre the Giant. I'm giving this one a 3. That's followed up with Steve Lombardi, who would go on to be the Brooklyn Brawler, going up against Mad Dog Vachon. This was probably my least favorite match of the show. Mad Dog comes out and he kind of does a thing, and George Steele did it too, where they kind of lunge at the crowd and look like they're going to attack the crowd, somewhat like what Bruiser Brody did in Japan, or the Sheik would do in Japan. And he just comes out there and I don't know what it is about this match. It doesn't feel special, especially for how high it is on the card. And I know that WWF at the time structured their cards differently. They didn't quite put the main event or the semi-mains at the end of the card. Sometimes they put them in the middle, which is probably where Santana and Valentine was. That was probably before the intermission, or the tag match might have been an intermission, but it still didn't feel important. The match itself was really boring, really slow paced. It felt more like something that would fit in with the 70s style WWF than it would in the middle 80s WWF. Mad Dog Vachon does pick up the win here. I'm giving this one a 2. Next up, we have another match along the same lines, basically a glorified squash match. We have Sal Balamo going up against Paul Orndorff, and if you notice, a lot of the quote-unquote jobbers of the time were on this. Jose Luis Rivera, S.D. Jones, Steve Lombardi, Sal Balamo. These were all guys that I fondly remember as being the enhancement talent of the era. So it's kind of neat seeing these guys here, but it's also kind of disappointing that this is a Madison Square Garden card and it's supposed to be quote-unquote like a pay-per-view type environment. I do like this match better. I feel like Orndorff had better pacing, better intensity. One of the best pile drivers I've ever seen, and that's anytime Orndorff does a pile driver. I think Paul Orndorff's one of those guys that kind of gets lost in the mix. I mean, you hear about Savage, Hogan, Piper, Andre, all the guys of the time period, but you don't really hear of Orndorff that much as being one of the guys that really was a stud here, and he absolutely was. Whether he was a heel or a face, he had one of the great feuds of the era, in my opinion. His feud with Hogan is probably one of Hogan's better feuds during this run. I like this match a little bit better than the one before. Orndorff does pick up the win. I'm giving this one a 3. Still not really great, but at least it's a passable match. Now next up we have Chief Jay Strongbow versus Cowboy Bob Orton, which is brought up on commentary, and I don't know how politically correct this is now. It's Cowboys versus Indians. For this to be the semi-main event where we have a match with Tito Santana and Greg Valentine on the card, where the Wild Samoans versus East-West Connection, again, it's a little bit surprising to me. Even David Schultz and Andre the Giant, I think, would have been a better semi-main than this. This is a good match. It suffered from a lot of the same problems most of the other matches on the card did. The speed, the pacing was a little bit slow. Strongbow was never great in the ring. Orton was, and this is kind of a family trait. Cowboy Bob Orton was fantastic, and he was a ring general. People forget that when Randy Orton came into wrestling, he had a lot to live up to because Cowboy Bob Orton was great. This match ultimately goes to Bob Orton. Orton picks up the win here. I'm giving it a 3. I thought it was good, but it kind of has some of the same failings that a lot of the matches do at this time. Unfortunately, the WWE style just doesn't age well. Now, last but not least, we get the main event of the show, the boot camp match between the Iron Sheik and Sergeant Slaughter. Now, for everything I said about matches not aging well, and the plottiness, and the era and the style, this was the opposite. This is a match I would have expected to see in Memphis or in Crockett or even Mid-South at the time. There was a believability, a violence added to it. WWF, even at this time, wasn't really known as a bloody company. They tried to shy away from the blood a lot. This was bloody right off the bat. They were hitting each other with riding cops, with chairs, with a helmet. This was really fun, and these two guys, you could tell, enjoyed working with each other and enjoyed putting on this kind of a match. This was by far my favorite match of the night. The only thing I could say that would be different from this in a modern match would be there's not anything off the ropes on this. But other than that, I could easily see a Jon Moxley having this match, or a Roman Reigns having this match, or even a Brock Lesnar having this style of a match, where it's highly based on physicality, highly based on fighting. There was an air of realism here. I really enjoyed this. Ultimately, Sergeant Slaughter picked up the win here because, of course, he did. He's the face of this. I'm giving this one a 5. I thought it was very enjoyable. It made the rest of the card worth waiting through to get to this because this was awesome, too. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Overall, there were a couple things that stood out here. First, with this being 1984, where was Hulk Hogan? He was already in the company, so that took a little bit away from it. There was no World Championship match on a Madison Square Garden card, which was a little surprising, and I understand that this was the match that sold it, the boot camp match, but still, it was a little bit surprising Hogan was nowhere to be seen. Piper's nowhere to be seen. He wasn't even in the corner of Orndorff or Schultz at this period. The overall ring work and the overall style, again, I keep harping on this, but it was not great. It was fun seeing certain people in different lights, like a very young Steve Lombardi here, and wondering why Steve Lombardi wasn't looked at as something better than just being a jobber, because he had a great look, he had a good body to him. Don't know why they didn't think more of him. Seeing Santana and Valentine, which is a feud I thoroughly remember from my childhood, was great here. Seeing Adonis and Murdoch, especially Adonis before he really blew up in weight and before his adorable Adrian Adonis run, is always fun. Seeing the Samoans, I love watching the Samoans matches because to me, they felt a little bit out of time. It felt like they would have fit in better in the late 80s than they did here. I could easily see them having great matches with Demolition, with the Hart Foundation, the Rockers, the British Bulldogs, all of those great tag teams. This card was a little bit lackluster other than the main event and the tag team match. Overall, I'm going to give it a 3. I thought it was good. If you do go to watch this, I definitely recommend, unless you're just wanting to see other people in this time frame, and there's definitely people here that are worth watching. Morocco, George Steele as a villain, the Samoans, the East-West Connection, Santana and Valentine. I've mentioned this over and over again. There's a lot of people worth going back if you're fans of them and watching their matches. But if you're not, I would skip everything except for the tag match and the main event if you're going to go watch this afterwards. To me, those two were great. It showed what the WWF could be and was when it was really hitting on all cylinders, where the rest of the card kind of felt like just a mundane, run-of-your-mill, ho-hum WWE show. With all that being said, let's smash that like button, share the video, subscribe if you haven't. If you see where it says join, that's how you become a member. It really helps the channel out if you decide to do that. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, let's throw an Iron Sheik or Sheiky Baby or Cosgrove or anything representing the Sheik in the comments in respect of the absolute legend that he is. Rest in peace, Iron Sheik. You will sorely be missed. You were a big part of my childhood, and I'm willing to bet you were a big part of a lot of the people that are going to watch this video's childhood as well. Rest in peace, my friend. Godspeed. With all that being said, my name is George Coles, and this has been another It Came From The Network.